So the format today is short answers with multiple choice responses. And of course, we're testing everything: vocabulary interpretation, punctuation, grammar, the whole bit. So each question addresses a different skill. So let's get started. Question 17. Ancestral Puebloans, the civilization from which present-day Pueblo tribes descended, emerged as early as 1500 BCE in an area of what is now the southwestern United States and dispersed suddenly in the late 1200 CE, abandoning established villages with systems for farming crops and turkeys. Recent analysis comparing turkey remains at Mesa Verde, one such village in southern Colorado, to samples from modern turkey populations in the Rio Grande Valley of north central New Mexico, determined that the latter birds descended in part from turkeys cultivated at Mesa Verde, with shared genetic markers appearing only after 1280. Thus, researchers concluded that. So let's reconstruct the story. So the Pueblo Indians were in one location going back to 1500 BCE. And one of the things that they did was they raised turkeys. Then in 1200 CE, which is basically the modern era, they moved. And it looks like they took with them some of their turkeys. So when they looked at the Rio Grande Valley in northern New Mexico, they found turkeys that appeared to be descended from the turkeys that the Pueblos had in the other location in southern Colorado. So they were genetically related. So the storyline should be, well, the Pueblos were doing turkey farming, and then they moved and took the turkeys with them. And now the turkeys that are there in the new place are descended from the turkeys that the Pueblos took with them. So that would be kind of the logical conclusion. So let's see what the choices are. A, conditions of the terrain in the Rio Grande Valley and Mesa Verde had greater similarities in the past than they do today. Well, nothing in the passage addresses that. It's totally irrelevant. B, some ancestral Puebloans migrated to the Rio Grande Valley in the late 1200s and carried farming practices with them. That's the right answer. They brought the turkeys with them. That's why they're related. C, indigenous peoples living in the Rio Grande Valley primarily planted crops and did not cultivate turkeys before 1280. No, you can't conclude that. You don't know that. It doesn't say that in the passage. And D, the ancestral Puebloans of Mesa Verde likely adopted the farming practices of indigenous peoples living in other regions. Again, the passage does not address that. So the only answer, the only logical answer that flows from the story is B, some ancestral Puebloans migrated to the Rio Grande Valley in the late 1200s and carried farming practices, i.e. turkeys, with them. So the right answer to 17 is B. 18, one challenge when researching whether holding elected office changes a person's behavior is the problem of ensuring that the experiment has an appropriate control group. To reveal the effect of holding office, researchers must compare people who hold elected office with people who do not hold office, but who are otherwise similar to the office holders. Since researchers are unable to control which politicians win elections, they therefore, so if you have a group of politicians, basically, and you're trying to figure out who's the control group and who are the elected officials, and you're trying to set the experiment up in advance, you can't, because you don't know who's going to get elected. So you can't establish your control group or your experimental group for that matter, because you don't know. So let's look at the possible answers. Which choice logically completes the sentence? Politicians win elections. They therefore struggle to find valid data about the behavior of politicians who do not currently hold office. Okay, that's not true because they can get data on people who don't hold office. They just can't use it as a control group. B, can only conduct valid studies with people who have previously held office rather than people who presently hold office. Well, that's really would not actually be very valuable, right? Because it's after the fact. It doesn't show you what the behavior is while they're holding office. C, should select a control group of people who differ from the office holders in several ways. No, they should only differ in one way. Either they got elected or they didn't. Otherwise, they should all be very similar. That's what experimentation is all about. You change one variable, but everything else remains the same. D, we'll find it difficult to identify a group of people who can function as an appropriate control for their studies. And there it is. So they can't really select a control because some of the control people may actually get elected. So the right answer to 18 is D. Okay, 19. In his groundbreaking book, Bengali Harlem and the Lost Histories of South Asian America, Vivek Bald uses newspaper articles, census records, ship's logs, and memoirs to tell the blank who made New York City their home in the early 20th century. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? To tell the stories, right, of the South Asian immigrants who made New York City their home. So the words are all the same. Really what we're just looking at here is punctuation. So is the word stories, is it a possessive? Or is it not a possessive? It's not a possessive. It's followed by a prepositional phrase of. So the stories should just be plural. It's not possessive. Nothing belongs to the stories. The stories are about these South Asian immigrants, right? It's the immigrants' possessive stories, but stories is not possessive. So the only right answer is C, okay? Because it needs to be plural, but it can't be possessive. So if you put it into the sentence, it reads census records, ships, logs, and memoirs to tell the stories of the South Asian immigrants who made New York City their home. Okay, so the right answer to 19 is C. 20. In her two major series, Memory Test and Autobiography, painter Howardina Pindell explores themes blank healing, self-discovery, and memory by cutting and sewing back together pieces of canvas and inserting personal artifacts, such as postcards, into some of the paintings. Okay. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? Okay. So do we want of, just plain of in A? Do we want of followed by a comma? Do you want of followed by a dash? Or do you want of followed by a colon? So let's read it. In her two major series, Memory Test and Autobiography, painter Howardina Pindell explored themes of healing, self-discovery, and memory. Do we require any punctuation at all between of and healing? Do we put a comma after a preposition? Or a dash or a colon? No, because we don't want to separate the prepositional phrase. So in this case, it's of healing, self-discovery, and memory. So the right answer to 20 is A, no punctuation required. You don't put punctuation after a preposition when it's starting a prepositional phrase. Okay. 21, both Sona Charapotra, an Indian American, and Donielle Clayton, an African American, grew up frustrated by the lack of diverse characters in books for young people. In 2011, these two writers joined forces to found Cake Literary, a book packaging blank specializes in the creation and promotion of stories told from diverse perspectives for children and young adults. Which choice completes the text so it conforms to the conventions of standard English? A book packaging company. Okay, so company is there all four times. Now, you could say specializing in the creation if you just wanted to leave company alone. But when you use the verb specializes, you need that. That specializes. So when you look at these choices, D is wrong because there should be no comma between company and that. C is wrong because company alone is not going to do it. A book packaging company specializes, no, it should be specializing if you're just going to use company. A is wrong because it's company alone with a comma that doesn't belong there. So the only correct answer to 21 is B. A book packaging company that specializes in the creation and promotion of stories. So the right answer to 21 is B. 22, a study led by scientist Rebecca Kirby at the University of Wisconsin-Madison found that black bears that eat human food before hibernation have increased levels of a rare carbon isotope blank due to higher carbon-13 levels in corn and cane sugar. Bears with these elevated levels were also found to have much shorter hibernation periods on average. So a lot of human diets is composed of corn and cane sugar. And when bears eat human food, they show the same markers, the carbon tracing markers that are found in human food. The question we have here is carbon-13 is the answer, right? And then they're giving you the chemical notation for the isotope of carbon-13. But here's the deal. You want to know how do you punctuate it? And does the comma go between the chemical symbol and the name? Is there no comma at all? Does it go after? Or does it go before and after the chemical symbol? What do you think is the right way to punctuate this? Well, basically, D is the right answer. So a rare carbon isotope, comma, carbon-13, and then when you put a parenthesis there, you're basically restating carbon-13 just as a chemical equation, C13, a chemical symbol. You don't need any punctuation between what's in the parentheses and the word carbon-13. Okay, but you do need a comma after it because it's basically a synonym. It's restating carbon isotope. So a rare carbon isotope, comma, carbon-13, comma, due to the higher C13 levels. So the right answer to 22 is D. Again, you do not need a comma between the chemical symbol and the name. You have the parentheses there, and that's all you need. But you do need to separate those out with a comma before and after isotope and before due, or DUE. Okay, so the right answer to 22 is D. 23. In 2010, archaeologist Noel Hidalgo Tan was visiting the 12th century temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia when he noticed markings of red paint on the temple blank. The help of digital imaging techniques, comma, he discovered the markings to be part of an elaborate mural containing over 200 paintings. So the question here is, how are we going to punctuate this? When he noticed markings of red paint on the temple walls, well, all four choices say walls, okay? But the question is, what are we going to do after walls? Are we going to put a comma and then put with the help of digital imaging techniques? Are we going to put no punctuation as in B? Are we going to put a so with, like markings of red paint on the temple walls, so with the help of digital imaging techniques? Or are we going to do D, which is markings of red paint on the temple walls, period? New sentence with the help of digital imaging techniques, comma, subordinate clause, new sentence, completely new sentence. He discovered the markings. So the only thing that stops this from being a run-on sentence is the period D. You've got one complete thought. He noticed markings of red paint on the wall. And then you've got another complete thought. With the help of digital imaging, he discovered that the markings are part of the mural. Two separate sentences with separate subjects and verbs and separate ideas. Okay, so you have to separate that into two sentences, otherwise it's a run-on. So the right answer to 23 is D. Okay, 24. Working from an earlier discovery of Charpentier's, chemists Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna, winners of the 2020 Nobel Prize in Chemistry, recreated and then reprogrammed the so-called genetic scissors of a species of DNA cleaving bacteria, blank, a tool that is revolutionizing the field of gene technology. Okay, so we are looking for what verb form of the verb forge we should use. They reprogrammed the genetic scissors of a species of DNA bacteria, DNA cleaving bacteria. A, to forge a tool that is revolutionizing the field. B, forging a tool that is revolutionizing the field. C, forged a tool. D, and forging a tool. So the grammar on this leads you to basically A is the correct answer. They did this to forge a tool that is revolutionizing the field. The tool was basically the genetic scissors. If you don't say to forge, if you try some of these other things, like forging, reprogram the so-called genetic scissors of a species of DNA cleaving bacteria, forging, basically, it looks like the bacteria is forging something. It creates confusion in a sense. Or forged is basically bacteria forged tool. So that doesn't make sense, right? Because it's confusing. And forging, you don't want to put an and in there because you're referring back to what they're doing. And if you put an and in there, it sounds like they're doing something different. But really what they're doing is the act of forging the tool is basically the genetic scissors that they discovered and modified. So the only right answer is that they reprogrammed the genetic scissors of a species of bacteria to forge a tool that is revolutionizing the field of gene technology, which, the acronym for it is CRISPR, CRISPR. And they just won the Nobel Prize in 2020, although they did that work years ago. CRISPR's been around for a few years. But they haven't yet used it therapeutically in humans, but they will eventually to cut out mutations and replace them with normal genes. Okay, 25. In 2016, engineer Vanessa Galvez oversaw the installation of 164 bioswales, vegetated channels designed to absorb and divert stormwater. So that phrase, vegetated channels designed to absorb and divert stormwater, is separated by commas, is telling you what bioswales are. Okay? Along the streets of Queens, New York, by reducing the runoff flowing into city sewers, which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions? So you've got a new sentence: by reducing the runoff flowing into city sewers, comma. What's reducing the runoff? Mitigation, bioswales, street flooding. So this is really, really easy. Something is reducing the runoff. And that's what should follow that comma. By reducing the runoff flowing into city sewers, comma, has to start with bioswales, because it's the bioswales that are reducing the runoff. Okay? You don't want to start with mitigation. You don't want to start with both street. So A and D are out. The bioswales it's either B or C. Okay, and so which one would you choose, B or C? You know it has to start with bioswales. So let's look at it. By reducing the runoff flowing into city sewers, the bioswales have mitigated both street flooding and the resulting pollution of nearby waterways. Okay. And you see how C says the bioswales mitigation of both street flooding and the resulting pollution of nearby waterways has been achieved. Do you need has been achieved? Or is that just redundant? Okay. So it is redundant. It's unnecessary. That last sentence has been achieved. That last part of that sentence is not necessary. It's a redundancy. So all you really need is B. By reducing the runoff flowing into city sewers, comma, the bioswales have mitigated, means reduced, both street flooding and the resulting pollution of nearby waterways, period. You don't need to say has been achieved. So you eliminate A and D because they don't start with the bioswales after the comma. And you eliminate C because it has a redundancy. So the only right answer to 25 is B. Okay, good. 26, a study published by Rice University geoscientist Ming Tang in 2019 offers a new explanation for the origin of Earth's blank structures called arcs. Towering ridges that form when a dense oceanic plate subducts under a less dense continental plate, comma, melts in the mantle below, and then rises and bursts through the continental crust above. Okay, so origin of the Earth's continents, right? And geologic structures called arcs, okay? So you look at this and you say to yourself, well, how should this be punctuated? Should there be nothing between continents and geological? Should there be a colon? Should there be a semicolon? And should there be a period? Okay, so let's look at D first. If there were a period, geologic structures called arcs, towering ridges that form when a dense oceanic plate subducts under a less dense continental plate, melts in the mantle below, and then rises and bursts to the continental crust above. That's not a complete sentence. Okay, so it's a sentence fragment. So D is incorrect. You can't start a new sentence because if you start with geological, it's not a complete sentence. So let's look at semicolon. Okay, Earth's continents, semicolon. Geological structures called arcs, towering, and so on and so forth. Again, that's not a complete sentence. Remember, the semicolon, what becomes before and what comes after the semicolon both have to be complete sentences. Even though you don't capitalize the first word after the semicolon, it should be able to stand alone as a complete sentence. And again, it's a sentence fragment. So C has to be wrong. Then let's take a look at A. A has no punctuation, right? Earth's continents, geological structures. Okay? Without any punctuation at all, it's just a run-on sentence. It makes no sense. Now we look at B, the colon. Earth's continents, colon. What do we use a colon for? We use a colon when it's going to be a list. We also use a colon when what comes after the colon is a direct explication of what came before the continents. Colon. What are continents? Structure called arcs, towering ridges that form when a dense oceanic plate subducts under a less dense continental plate, melts in the mantle below, and then rises and bursts through the continental crust above. So the only thing that makes sense in terms of grammar here is B. Okay? Again, because C and D are sentence fragments, A is a run-on sentence, and B uses the colon appropriately to explicate a new description of what a continent is. Okay? So that's one of the uses of a colon. And remember, what comes after a colon does not have to be a complete sentence. 27. During a 2021 launch, Rocket Lab's Electron rocket experienced an unexpected failure, colon. Its second stage booster shut down suddenly after ignition. So there's a perfect example of how to use a colon. Failure is fully explained after the colon. It's an explication of failure. And that's why you would use a colon there, because you're basically saying the same thing. The failure was the shutdown of the second stage booster after ignition. So let's read this again. During 2021 launch, Rocket Lab's Electron rocket experienced an unexpected failure, colon. Its second stage booster shut down suddenly after ignition, period. Blank, instead of downplaying the incident, Rocket Lab CEO publicly acknowledged what happened and apologized for the loss of the rocket's payload, which had consisted of 2 satellites. So which choice makes sense? Afterward, additionally, indeed, similarly. So all of these are connecting adverbs that should have some relation to what came before. What came before was a failure of the rocket. So basically, it's telling you how the CEO of the company responded to this failure. Additionally, would basically indicate that something went wrong with the CEO. You know, the rocket failed and the CEO failed, but that's not what it says. So additionally is not good. Indeed would be it would be an emphasizer. So you'd expect something like, indeed, this was the 3rd time that this has happened. Okay, that's an intensifier, indeed. So that doesn't make sense. Similarly, well, what's similar about the CEO admitting what happened? and the rocket failing, nothing. So all three of those rejoinders or those connectors make no sense. The only one that makes sense is afterward. Two events occurred. The rocket failed. Afterward, the CEO apologized, admitted what happened, and apologized. It's the only one that makes sense. The other three choices, B, C, and D, do not make any sense because they don't relate back logically to what came before. Okay. So the right answer is A, after 28. When soil becomes contaminated by toxic metals, it can be removed from the ground and disposed of in a landfill. So you can dig the soil up and throw it away, basically, period. Blank contaminated soil can be detoxified via phytoremediation. Plants that can withstand high concentrations of metals absorb the pollutants and store them in their shoots, which are then cut off and safely disposed of, probably in the landfill, preserving the health of the plants. So what you're doing here is saving the soil. Rather than throwing away precious topsoil, you're using the plants to suck the metals out, and then you're throwing the plants away, or the shoots of the plants, and thereby you don't have to dig up all the topsoil, which is valuable, and throw it away. So it's a different way of doing it. So you can deal with contamination by just digging up the soil and throwing it in the landfill, but you have another choice. You have an alternative, just to plant these plants that can engage in phytoremediation. So when you look at these adverbial connectors, alternatively, specifically, for example, and as a result, the only one that makes sense is alternative. You can either dig up the soil or plant these special plants to decontaminate the soil. Those are your two choices. They're alternate choices. One is not specific of the other, one is not an example of the other, one is not a result of the other. They're just alternatives. So the only right answer to 28 is A. 29, while researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. Calendar used by most of the world, the Gregorian calendar, has 365 days. Because 365 days can't be divided by 7, the number of days in a week, calendar dates fall on a different day of the week each year. So for example, May 10th in 2023 is going to be a different day of the week than May 10th, 2024. Because the Hank Henry Permanent Calendar, developed as an alternative to the Gregorian calendar, has 364 days, one day less. Because 364 can be divided evenly by 7, calendar dates fall on the same day of the week each year, which supports more predictable scheduling. So May 10th every single year would be, say, a Thursday. It would never change, right? So the student wants to explain an advantage of the Hank Henry calendar, which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal. Let's just read them. The Gregorian calendar has 365 days, which is one day longer than the Hank Henry permanent calendar. Doesn't explain the advantage. B, adopting the Hank Henry permanent calendar would help solve a problem with the Gregorian calendar. Doesn't explain what the problem is. C, designed so calendar dates would occur on the same day of the week each year. The Hank Henry calendar supports more predictable scheduling than does the Gregorian calendar. That's very, very specific. It explains what the difference is in terms of scheduling and why the Hank Henry calendar might be superior in terms of predictability. So C is definitely a viable answer here. And then our last choice is D. The Hank Henry permanent calendar was developed as an alternative to the Gregorian calendar, which is currently the most used calendar. Again, doesn't explain the advantage or even address it. So the only right answer here is C. So 29 is C. Why it's better than the Gregorian. Oh, that's never going to happen. We're never going to adopt that because basically the Earth goes around the sun closer to 365 and 364 days. That's why we need a leap year, where we have an extra day. And if we did 364, it would throw off the years even more. Okay, 30. While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy is a nearly 1,000-year-old alliance of 6 native nations in the Northeast U.S. The members are bound by a centuries-old agreement known as the Great Law of Peace. Historian Bruce Johansen is one of several scholars who believe that the principles of the Great Law of Peace influenced the US Constitution. This theory is called the influence theory. Johanson cites the fact that Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson both studied the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. So the student wants to present the influence theory to an audience unfamiliar with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? So remember, you've got to explain what this is, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. So let's look at the choices. Historian Bruce Johanson believes that the Great Law of Peace was very influential. Again, doesn't explain anything about this confederacy. The influence theory is supported by the fact that Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson both studied the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Well, it mentions it, but it doesn't give you enough detail about it. C, the influence theory holds that the principles of the Great Law of Peace, a centuries-old agreement binding 6 native nations in the northeastern U.S., influenced the U.S. Constitution. So you're addressing what influenced the U.S. Constitution, the Great Law of Peace, an agreement binding 6 nations. So you're basically explaining that relationship. And then D, Native people, including the members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, influenced the founding of the U.S. in many different ways. Again, it doesn't address what part of the Haudenosaunee Agreement, the Great Law of Peace, influenced the U.S. Constitution. And it doesn't explain what the influence theory is. So you've got the only viable answer here is C. So 30 is C, because it explains it in much better detail. Okay, 31. While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. In 1999, astronomer Todd Henry studied the differences in surface temperature between the sun and nearby stars. His team mapped all stars within 10 parsecs, approximately 200 trillion miles of the sun. The surface temperature of the sun is around 9,800 degrees Fahrenheit, which classifies it as a G star. 327, the majority of the 357 stars in the study within the 10 parsecs, were classified as K or M stars with surface temperatures under 8,900, cooler than the sun. So the sun was warmer than most of the other stars close to it. 11 of the 357 stars in the study were classified as A or F stars with surface temperatures greater than 10,300 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than the sun. So majority were cooler and a few of them were hotter. The student wants to emphasize how hot the sun is relative to nearby stars. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this? A, at around 9,800 degrees Fahrenheit, which classifies it as a G star, the sun is hotter than most, but not all of the stars within 10 parsecs of it. Would you say that that's an accurate description? Absolutely. Does it tell you where the sun sits in terms of the temperature spectrum? Absolutely. So it basically accomplishes the student's goals. How hot is the sun relative to nearby stars? So that's definitely a viable answer. Okay, B. Astronomer Todd Henry determined that the sun at around 9,800 degrees is a G star and several other stars within a 10 parsec range are A and F stars. Doesn't tell you anything about temperature ranges or where the sun fits in. C, of the 357 stars within 10 parsecs, 327 are classified as K or M stars with surface temperatures under 8,900. Okay, but it doesn't tell you anything about where the sun sits in terms of its temperature relative to the other stars. D, while most of the stars within 10 parsecs of the sun are classified as K, M, A, or F stars, the sun is classified as a G star due to its surface temperature of 9,800. Doesn't tell you anything about the temperature of the other stars relative to the sun. So the only right answer on this particular question 31 is A. At around 9,800 degrees Fahrenheit, which classifies it as a G star, the sun is hotter than most, but not all of the stars within 10 parsecs. So it gives you the relative temperatures, which is what you wanted. Okay, 32. While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. The Atlantic Monthly magazine was first published in 1857. The magazine focused on politics, art, and literature. In 2019, historian Catherine Halverson published the book Faraway Women and the Atlantic Monthly. Its subject is female authors whose autobiographies appeared in the magazine in the early 1900s. So that's all the stuff we know. One of the authors discussed is Juanita Harrison. Okay, so we know when the monthly magazine was first published. We know what it focused on in terms of subject matter. We know that Catherine Halverson published a book called Faraway Women in the Atlantic Monthly. And the subject of the book was female authors who had their autobiographies printed in the magazine in the early 1900s. And one of them was Juanita Harrison. The student wants to introduce Catherine Halverson's book to an audience already familiar with the Atlantic Monthly. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this? So you don't need to explain what the Atlantic Monthly is, because they're already familiar with it. A, Catherine Halverson's Faraway Women and the Atlantic Monthly discusses female authors whose autobiographies appeared in the magazine in the early 1900s. Well, gosh darn it, that's pretty good, right? It tells you that it's Catherine Halverson's book, gives you the title of the book, and tells you what the book is about. Basically, exactly what you want your audience to know, or already familiar with the Atlantic Monthly. So that choice A looks like a really good choice. B, a magazine called the Atlantic Monthly, referred to in Catherine Halverson's book title, was published in 1857. Well, remember, they already know that. They already know. Your reader knows what the Atlantic Monthly is. C, Faraway Women in the Atlantic Monthly features contributors to the Atlantic Monthly, first published in 1857 as a magazine focusing on politics. Okay, it doesn't tell you really much about what the book is about. Okay, it starts explaining the Atlantic Monthly, which your reader already knows about. So that's not a good choice. And D, an author discussed by Catherine Halverson is Juanita Harrison, whose autobiography appeared in the Atlantic Monthly in the early 1900s. Well, that doesn't tell you the subject of her book. It tells you about one person. So it's definitely not a broad enough statement. So D is incorrect. So the only right answer here is A. Catherine Halverson's Faraway Women and the Atlantic Monthly discusses female authors whose autobiographies appeared in the magazine in the early 1900s. Okay, so that's really what you want to accomplish. Okay, question 33. While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. The magnificent frigate bird, Frigata magnificens, is a species of seabird that feeds mainly on fish, tuna, squid, and other small sea animals. It is unusual among seabirds in that it doesn't dive into the water for prey. One way it acquires food is by using its hook-tipped bill to snatch prey from the surface of the water, I guess while it's flying low. Another way it acquires food is by taking it from weaker birds by force. This behavior is known as kleptoparasitism. Klepto means to steal. If you're a kleptomaniac, you love to steal things. So kleptoparasitism, you're stealing food from other birds. Okay, so this sucker stays dry. He never dives in the water. Gets food by either flying low and scooping its prey with its beak, or by stealing it from another bird who already got it. The student must emphasize the similarity between the two ways a magnificent frigate bird acquires food. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this? Emphasize a similarity. Wants to emphasize a similarity between these two techniques. A magnificent frigate bird never dives into the water, instead using its hook-tipped bill to snatch prey. Does not emphasize a similarity between the two techniques. Doesn't even mention one of the techniques. B, neither of a magnificent frigate bird's two ways of acquiring food, either scooping or fighting, requires the bird to dive into the water. Does that highlight a similarity? Yes. Neither means both of them do not require diving into the water. So that highlights a similarity between those two techniques. C, of the magnificent frigate bird's two ways of acquiring food, only one is known as kleptoparasitism. Again, it does not address the similarity between the two different techniques. And D, in addition to snatching prey from the water with its hook-tipped bill, a magnificent viper takes food from other birds by force. Both of those statements are true, but again, it doesn't highlight the similarity. The similarity, which is highlighted, is that neither technique requires that the bird dive into the water. That's what both techniques have in common. Okay, so the right answer to this question 33 is B. So always look at this. What does the student want to emphasize? Because otherwise you might pick D, because D is, very accurate and complete, but it doesn't talk about the similarity. Student wants to emphasize the similarity. So always read what the student wants to emphasize before you choose. Okay, that's very important. All right, guys, we're going to stop right there, and then we're going to try to pull up the vocabulary, which is always the most fun. For me, anyway. And we have a nice group of words tonight and some interesting etymology. I hope you guys enjoy the etymology of these words, because I like to do. By the way, there's a website called Etymonline, 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 and basically you can type in the word, and it goes into extensive detail about the different parts of the word and the etymology, not only going back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome and Middle English and Middle French and so on and so forth, but also going back to the Indo-European language. The Indo-European language, which predated ancient Greek and ancient Latin. So all of the languages of Western Europe, pretty much, perhaps with the exception of Gaelic, came from the Indo-European language. And so that's kind of a common root of all of our European languages. Okay, so I got the vocabulary, I'm pulling it up. There we go. And let's see if I can share it now. Here it is. Excellent. Okay, so first word, can you guys see that on the left side?
Yes.
Okay, it's mural. What is a mural? Can anyone tell me what a mural is?
A work of art done on a wall.
Yeah, it's a painting, a fresco, or an acrylic painting, or even a collage that's done on a wall, directly on the wall. And usually, a mural is huge. It's usually big. People do murals because they want to make a big painting that people are going to notice. And so, otherwise they would use a canvas. And so there are some very famous murals by a Mexican artist. If you ever go to Mexico City, they have a whole bunch of these gigantic murals that you can see in and around the center of the city. And so that's one of the art forms that evolved in Mexico. Okay, forge. What does it mean to forge something?
To make a metal object by heating and beating.
Yeah, you have to shape metal, and the way you shape it is by making it soft, and the way you make it soft is by heating it. So as the temperature of the metal rises, the metal becomes more pliable, softer. So one of the professions that disappeared when cars came into being and basically started dominating transportation was the blacksmith. And the blacksmith, his main job was making horseshoes. So along came the automobile, and you didn't need horseshoes anymore. So the blacksmith, as a profession, as a trade, kind of disappeared. Okay. So what does it mean to subduct? This is basically a geologic term.
To push under.
Yeah, so if two tectonic plates, there's I think 7 or 8 tectonic plates on Earth, they're constantly bumping against each other. And if two of them come together and one of them dives underneath the other one, That's subduction. Okay. So you think of your two hands, if they were even like here, right? See my hands? And this is one tectonic plate, this is another, and they're coming together, bumping, and then one of them goes under the other one. That's subduction of the tectonic plate. A lot of times that one will melt because it goes down into the mantle, which is very, very hot. Okay? And sometimes, when continents collide like that, or when tectonic plates collide, they both go up like that, and they form mountain ranges. So there are different ways that these tectonic plates can interact. Okay. So subduction. So dispel, what does it mean to dispel something?
To make a doubt or feeling disappear.
Yeah, you don't dispel like physical things. Like you could say, he dispelled the pollution. You don't use dispel in that way. You'd say he cleaned up the pollution, he eliminated the pollution. When you dispel, it's something more of a spirit kind of thing, like a doubt, a feeling or a doubt. He dispelled all the doubts of the audience when he was able to dive from a high place into a tiny little pool. Everybody was scared that he was going to miss the pool, but he dispelled their doubts. He dispelled their fears. He dispelled their anxious feeling. So that's how you use that word. Don't use it like to refer to a physical thing, like he dispelled all the garbage that was on the floor. No, that's not appropriate. Okay, disrepute. What does it mean when somebody achieves disrepute or is held in disrepute?
A lack or decline of good reputation.
Yeah, dis meaning negative or bad repute, bad reputation. So the state of being held in low esteem by the public. After they found out about his numerous crimes, the actor was held in disrepute. And the way that phrase is used is to hold someone in disrepute. It means that you basically don't approve of them. Okay? Or the public itself doesn't approve of them. Okay, dour. We never want to be around people who are dour. Dour people are no fun. So what does it mean to be dour?
Stern and harsh.
Yeah, you're always in a bad mood. You're gloomy. You have a very kind of severe personality. You're very negative. You never smile. You're not a gentle person. You're just dour. It's like, it just doesn't feel good to be around you. I don't want to be around you. You know what I mean? You put me in a bad mood. So that's what dour means. Okay, duplicity. This is a great word. Duplicity. What does it mean to be duplicitous?
Dishonest talk or behavior.
Yeah. So duplicate, right? Duplicitous, deceitful, double dealing. So if you're duplicitous, since basically duple means two, you're one way with one person, and then you say the exact opposite with another person. So you're being duplicitous, you're being a double dealer, you're basically expressing different points of view depending on who you're with, which essentially means that you're manipulating people. You're not saying what you really think, you're being dishonest. So you're being duplicitous. And it's a very, very specific kind of deceitfulness that's really refers to somebody as being highly manipulative. Like for example, if you're working in a say a corporation, and you talk to your boss, and your boss is like, "What do you think about Mary Ann?" And you go, "Oh my God, Mary Ann, she's so lazy. Everybody has to carry her. She's really, really bad news. She's the weak link in the chain." Then you're with Mary Ann at lunch, and you go, "Mary Ann, you're such a great worker. You set such a good example for all of us. We really love working with you. You're such a hard worker, and you get so much done, and you inspire all of us." So again, saying the exact opposite depending on who you're talking to, manipulating. That's what duplicitous means. Okay? And people do that. They say different things that are contradictory depending on who they're talking to because they want to achieve something, they want to gain something. So they're manipulating the situation. Okay, and that's a form of deceit. It's a form of dishonesty. Good. Duress. When you do something under duress, what does it mean?
Under threats, violence, or restraints.
Yeah, you basically, someone is bringing some power to bear over you, threatening you, or uh, you know, pressuring you in a painful way, so that you do something that you really don't want to do. For example, John fired his secretary under duress from the corporate president, who thought that the secretary was rude to him. Under duress, you're doing something because someone is pressuring you, threatening you maybe, or causing you pain or discomfort to make you do it, even though you really don't want to do it. So you're doing it under duress. Okay, if you were left to your own wits, you would not choose to do it, but someone is putting the stinger on you and making you do it. So you're doing it under duress. Okay, good. Eclectic. What does it mean to be eclectic?
You get ideas from a wide range.
Yeah. When you refer to someone as eclectic, it really means that it kind of means that they're very experienced, they're very worldly, they're very well educated, well read, well traveled, that they know lots of people, and they've experienced many different things, and they pick and choose the things that they like. So when you say somebody has very eclectic tastes, they might like wine from southern Italy, but their beer from northern Czechoslovakia, and their scotch from a certain single malt scotch place in Western Ireland. So you know what I'm saying? Like they're just very worldly, very aware, but their tastes, they pick and choose what they like from different experiences, different cultures, different locations on Earth. So the opposite of that would be, oh, he's a Francophile. He loves everything French. He loves French food. He loves French fashion. He loves French language. He loves French architecture. He loves French Catholicism. He's a Francophile. He's a lover of French. Somebody who's eclectic is not like that. They pick and choose the aspects of different cultures that they like from all over the world. So it usually implies that they're very well traveled, they're very worldly, they're kind of knowledgeable, and they're very specific in what they like and don't like about different cultures. So eclectic is usually a good word. He has very eclectic tastes. He's a person who makes choices based on what he likes, and he's aware of many choices. Okay. What is an edict?
An official order from the court.
Yeah, an official order, a proclamation issued by somebody in authority. Now, in our system, it could be a judge, but in a monarchy, it could be king. And in a dictatorship, it could be Hitler. Somebody in authority issues an edict, a proclamation, a decree. Has to be done because they're the boss. They're the final arbiter. So when you issue an edict, that's like, it means you're in a position of power. People have to obey you. Okay. Now, our two words for today are eclectic and duplicity. Let's start with eclectic. So let's look at eclectic. Right here's my arrow, right? Ek and lectic. Let's break it right there. Now, this word eclectic comes from the ancient Greek. And in ancient Greek, this is an ek, which means out, away from. And this word lectic is actually Legein, legein. Legein in Greek means choice. So the word in Greek was eklegein, which meant you pick out what you like. You make you make choices that are your own. They're not everyone else's choices. And that's what makes you eclectic. Okay? You pick out things that you like. So again, break it down, ek and legein, outside to choose or choices. You're not a conformist. You're not a guy that just is a lover of only one thing. You like many different things. Okay, so that's where we get the word eclectic. Now, ek in Greek means outside, extra, external, exit. All of those words in modern English have an X there, but it comes from the Greek ek, which means out. Exit is a way out. External is something outside. Extra is something that's not part of the thing, but it's something separate from it. So you see where that prefix influences modern English. And legian, think about these words. Delegate. You choose a delegate of choice, right? Delegate. You chose a delegate to go to the conference. Or legacy. Legate, it's a choice that what is your legacy? What are you going to be giving to the world or giving to your children? You're choosing something. Again, comes from that Greek root, legian. The other thing is college. Co means together, and lege means choice. To choose together. If you go to the same college, you're choosing to study in the same institution, maybe even the same subject matter. So college is a co-choice. So this word appears in many words in the English language, and it comes from the Greek root legian, which is to choose. Okay. Now, the other word I wanted to talk about is duplicity. We both know that this basically refers to double, two things, right? So it comes from basically duplicitus, which is Latin, which means doubleness. But the word in Latin didn't necessarily mean deceitful. The word changed in meaning over time, over hundreds and hundreds of years, to become basically somebody that talks out of both sides of their mouth. Says one thing when they're looking right and something else when they're looking left. And that's where you get the doubleness, right? So think of all the words that have the dupla in it. Duplicate, right? That means two. Duo, two. Duplex is two living quarters in one building. Duplex. And deuce, the deuce in a pack of cards is two. Probably the only word that implies deceitfulness that uses the duple is duplicity. A lot of the rest of them just mean two. So that word kind of evolved in a very strange way from the ancient Latin. But the meaning is pretty clear, isn't it? Those people who are duplicitous, you want to be around them. Because you know what they do? They make two other people fight. They go to Joe and they say, Joe, Frank said that you were a moron. And he never wants to work with you again. Then you go to Frank and you say, hey, Frank, Joe said that you were a moron. And he never wants to work with you again. Now Frank and Joe hate each other. And based on this duplicitous person in the middle, who basically is lying to both of them. So, in a work setting, we call that person firestarter. They're constantly doing insane things to bring people into conflict. They're manipulating people. Those people are very, very dangerous to have in an office setting. They create tremendous disharmony and dysfunctionality. So, okay, guys, we're all set. So we will see you next Tuesday. And as you know, I always like you to review the vocabulary list, memorize the words and the spelling, and then use them in a sentence. And then try to use the words this week when you're talking to people so that you don't lose them. Because you want to be adding to your vocabulary. It's not just about the SATs, guys. Standardized testing is great. You're going to do wonderful on it. But it's also about your writing and your speaking skills, your communication skills, which are so critical for every aspect of your life. And I always say this, and I'm sorry to say it again, people judge you by the words you use. When you present yourself verbally and you are very adept at using the language and you have a broad vocabulary, it has a huge effect on the people around you. They hold you in higher esteem. It makes you more influential. Your ideas are more likely to be listened to. So it isn't just about standardized testing, although this will definitely help you. But it's a much broader, much bigger goal. Okay? All right, guys, God bless everyone, and we will see you next Tuesday night.
Thank you.
Thank you.